Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. It's a pleasure to follow my honourable friends and neighbours from both North and South Dorset. At risk of repeating what they've said, I hope the House will allow me. I'd first of all like to congratulate and thank my honourable friend from North Devon, who I think we've all thoroughly backed her quest to have this debate. And it's very important because it is very clear to me, Mr Deputy Speaker, that this House does not give enough time to debate and to discuss the rural issues of the day, because we have some important questions to ask ourselves. Why is levelling up not focused to rural areas in the same way it is to urban areas? Why does rural hardship not seem to matter in the same way that urban poverty does? Why do rural jobs attract less pay than in urban areas? Why does TfL get £1.7 billion of government money to bail them out, yet Dorset Council can get hardly anything? Especially when we have, of course, the worst frequency rail line in the country. I'd just like to let the Minister know that. But we should also ask ourselves why are we still in the position that the Treasury Green Book, and I don't want it to prioritise rural areas, I want it to give fairness to all parts of the United Kingdom, including rural Dorset. Why do sixth formers, that's 16 and 17-year-olds, in rural Dorset, have to pay to get on the school bus when you do not have to do, when those youngsters do not have to do so in urban areas? Social mobility in West Dorset, indeed I think across the wider Dorset area, is amongst the worst in the country in certain pockets. And the real levelling up required in this country is in rural Britain, which is why I'm so delighted to be able to contribute to this debate. My honourable friend, the neighbour, the member for North Dorset, very clearly articulated some detail, some very good statistics that I also had in my speech that he's pinched. But I just want to focus on a couple of those, if I may. It is totally unacceptable to me, and I think my neighbours, but definitely my constituents, that we're in a position of having one of the highest council taxes in the country, yet we have a zero revenue support grant, yet we look in places such as urban London, inner London, where there are boroughs with the lowest council tax in the country, yet they receive some £24 million in rural support grant. I give way to my honourable friend.
I'm very grateful to my friend and neighbour for giving way. Would he agree with me that there's also the spectre of negative revenue support grant hanging over us, whereby the government might actually tell Dorset Council it needs to pay some money back? Where this money is coming from, I absolutely have no idea. But would he not agree with me that that would just be adding, for want of a better phrase, insult to injury?
Can I thank my honourable friend for intervening? Yes, I wholly agree with him, and I'd like to just relay that message to the Minister as well. I hope we don't get into that territory of negative RSG, because I think there'll be mass rebellions from the Dorset MPs if that were the case. But just so we are clear, the state of our economy in Dorset, and for West Dorset, COVID was hugely damaging to us. We're not starting from a level playing field here. In West Dorset, I lost 18% of my businesses during that period. And just so we're clear what we're talking about 1,200 businesses shut over the COVID period. So we are already starting from a lower place, but it is so difficult to have that ability to make the case, because it feels as though that we're always starting from behind the line. Again, my honourable friends and neighbours have talked about adult social care, but I do also just want to reiterate this point, because Dorset County Hospital, which is in Dorchester in the West Dorset constituency, is so challenged at the moment. And just to put this into perspective, that the patients that are discharged into social care and at the expense of the council have risen threefold over the last 3 years. The situation with police funding, with fire funding and others is equally difficult, yet it is still so difficult to try and get any real understanding of that from the government. I'd also just like to briefly touch on housing, Mr Deputy Speaker, because housing in rural areas, in my opinion, requires huge reform. My honourable friend, the member for North Devon, earlier in her speech articulated very well some of the difficulties of which she faces with second homes, with properties that have been set aside now for Airbnb, full-time Airbnb properties. That has caused the most enormous difficulty in parts of West Dorset, so much so that there are some villages where you could walk through one evening in the winter and you'd almost think you're in a ghost town because there are so few properties occupied. We cannot go on in that situation and expect doctors and nurses and teachers and police officers to be able to live and work in the community. I would just like to bring to conclusion my remarks, and I would just like to be very clear that I'm afraid we have gone on too long without real action and progress in this area. It is my opinion that parts of rural Britain is actually being held in economic hostage by unfair bureaucracies, not just government departments, but others as well. I've mentioned the Green Book earlier. Within the Treasury, that's the allocations or the fairness being given to assessment of infrastructure investment to rural Britain as well as urban areas. But in other ways, the Environment Agency, the Rural Payments Agency, I could just keep going on. It is a level of bureaucracy that rural Britain finds so difficult and in itself is constraining our ability to make real economic progress and to contribute to the wider economic growth of this country. And I would ask the Minister please to take due note of that. Next week, I understand Prime Minister's questions. I have the opportunity to speak to the Prime Minister. When I see the Prime Minister next week, I'd just like to let the Minister know in advance that I will be asking him very clearly to set up a rural task force so we do not have the extent of these debates again where we are sharing continually the difficulties of which we face. Because I want rural Britain to get turbocharged, to lead the way. We are so fortunate in rural Britain today that some of the most entrepreneurial, creative, innovative solutions are found in this country, in its rural areas. And we need those solutions to help the wider country. Indeed, I think some urban areas of the country would do well to take them. So I'm going to ask the Prime Minister next week if he'll set up a rural task force. I think the suggestion of my honourable friend for North Dorset to have a rural czar is one very well made. I hope he'll consider those in his remarks when he winds up. Thank you.
Wind-ups will start.